All right, I'm pretty hyped up. The Build King agenda has been going strong. I've gotten a good amount of people recently to start the series. I have been talking to some people though about just in general about like the setup it, and I've been saying for the last I think week or so. One thing I think the series needs is a good fight, and I mean that from the standpoint of I think a lot of people are looking at more from the aspect of carpentry to where like it'd be like, oh, Toriko has cooking in it, and then thinking it's like Soma instead of having cooking in it but being a very action and world building based series and stuff, a lot of adventuring. That's kind of how I'm guessing it's gonna be. The same area for Build King is once we have more kind of just like general like fights and explorations, and it showing that it's not like the characters are gonna literally just sit around and like explain how carpentry works. Like it's not a carpentry educational series. It just has carpentry as an aspect to it, which again is also really unique and I like a lot. But this chapter, even though we didn't get a fight, I thought it was actually a really good character chapter. I did genuinely really like it. I was reading it, and I think I got about like halfway through or so. We got a little bit on Cork, and I was happy about that because I think that just is further getting her in a good spot to be confirmed as the female lead. Because the funny thing about it is Shima Bakuro. For those who either are interested in Build King and listening or read it, regardless if you read Toriko or not, like it's interesting to know like the manga himself isn't known for female characters. Like, Toriko doesn't really have a female lead. Like, Rin is the closest thing to it, but she's really not that involved. But Cork, this early, like, we got her in chapter... Was it chapter 4 we got Cork in? So, I mean, like, getting a female lead this early was really surprising, to me. Like, I think a lot of people that I've talked to that are Toriko fans that are reading Build King are genuinely surprised that we have a female lead this early. It would be like most other series not having a female lead, or if it was a female main character having a male lead. It's just it'd feel weird, but it's one of the things you're used to with this mangaka. But I'm happy so far. I think Quark's character has been enjoyable. Like, there hasn't been anything that makes me dislike her. There hasn't been anything that's like made me like, oh man, she's great. It's just kind of like she seems pretty cool. I like her so far. I think her design is fair. I like the plot line she's introduced in, and she seems really nice. But generally, just talking about this chapter, we know that they're going to now try and start renovations on the Upside Down Castle. We have now lore on the Upside Down Castle, and I mentioned that that the castle's lore itself, like the story behind this castle, is a 10 out of 10. Like the series itself has a lot of promise and it's interesting, but if you want to just talk about this castle, it's a upside down castle that's made out of a dragon tooth that was like the dragon, like the king of this whole continent. And it's on like a massive skeleton. Like, it's so cool. Like, it's just badass. And a really sick reveal. That's also an Easter egg to Toriko. But, like, doing it like a reference design. But, like, the Build King Darius is way... No, it's more serpent-like. It also looks a lot smaller than, like, the King Darius. That boy was huge. But, Tonkachi can't damage it at all. Like, he's unable to scratch this house. And there's even a couple notes, like, that Cork has met a couple people, like, prior that were trying to renovate it, but it's just too durable. And again, this is really interesting because I wasn't sure what, like, I wasn't really sure what the plan was, like, right now going on with the series, because this thing was hyped up. This is, like, dealing, it's still bones and it's still a building that, like, in the remnants of this creature, but, when you saw that 10 meter, which is... From what we can understand, the biggest size or the biggest length that Tonkachi can make his hammer, the longest it can be, didn't do any damage. It's like, oh shit. Well, what's the plan? Because you understood from a level of the of what the dragon fang and whatnot, where it stood and why it makes sense Tonkachi couldn't damage it. But it's like, well, then what's the plan? Like, I was a little bit curious because it's not like, oh, he goes and smashes it, wakes up a bunch of monsters and he's got to fight them or something. I was like, no, he can't do it at all. So like, okay, well, where's this going? I was genuinely really curious. It was a surprise to me. And that was also one of the things I really liked about the last chapter. But this chapter was really good. I think about like I said, I got about halfway in before I was like, damn, are we not getting a fight this chapter? Because, like I said, it's not the idea of like, I just want to fight. I think the series needs a good action moment, like a good chapter long battle to kind of really show this series. Like the mangaka's choreography, like some of the way that he does action, he does a lot more vicious battles than I think a lot of general shonens do. I like to say there are some that are super gory, but he's usually like a lot darker than I'd say like the average shonen mangaka. Like he's definitely like a good chunk further down the line. Like he's not Chainsaw Man, but he's definitely like on that pathway, he's looking down that corridor essentially. He's like a couple steps in there. But I was like a little bummed out because like, damn, we're not gonna have another fight chapter. But instead, it was a really good Tonkachi chapter, and I really liked that. That's one of the things that I saw people talking about. One Piece chapter 1000. And before anyone says it, because I know that there's gonna be somebody that's like, you're gonna compare Build King to One Piece. Like I know that there's obviously like large gaps, like in chapters, sales, fans, and whatnot. But I mean like. Chapter 1000 for One Piece was super hyped up, and I thought it would have like really big story world reveals, but it was way more of a Luffy chapter, and I still think that was good. And I think a lot of people looked at it from the standpoint of like disappointed that it wasn't a big chapter, like in terms of like Devil Fruit lore or stuff happened to Void Century or whatever. It was way more focused on the main character and his like a display of just showing him in chapter 1000 after 1000 chapters where he's at, and I thought that was good. I genuinely really liked that. I thought that was a good chapter, and it's kind of like that with Build King. Like this chapter, it wasn't what I expected, but it was way more on Tonkachi as an individual, and I thought that was really good. I genuinely really liked that. There's like a part where they're like, okay, you guys can, well, we're all evacuated, we're all out of the castle, so if you guys find any tools in there that you want to use, any special tools, go ahead. And we did see the shovel. I'm guessing the shovel is going to be relevant later. There's a couple hints to, I believe, is like a sign that it's going to have higher value. Generally, first off, it has a little bit more detail. If you like just look at like the shovel hand, like the shovel head, the way that there's like a little bit of patterns around the edge, the shovel metal looks like it's made of some form of weird material, the way that Shimabakura's has that extra sheen to it, kind of like what he does with gold and stuff. But it also doesn't have a handle, like it's just the head. So I'm guessing they're going to take it and then eventually going to handle back for it. Or, I think it'll have some form of plot relevance. I don't think convenience, but I was going to say like plot convenience, but it's like it doesn't really make sense. But plot relevance, and I think that way late, either it'll become like a useful weapon for one of them, or it'll, be something that becomes relevant later. Like if Shovel's like, oh, you guys found part of like the shovel that I had when I was younger. Like if this is Renga's item, it wouldn't surprise me. Because he's got the knife, and I kind of am not too sure about, maybe this will go to Cork. I think that would actually make sense if Cork, because Cork doesn't have a weapon, and Renga does have that knife, whatever. I don't think it's been named yet or really been talked about, but, it was from Shovel, and it's this, he gave Tonkachi his hammer, so I imagine the knife has its own abilities, and it came from a big deal, so it has to have some form of extra relevance. Like, I imagine it's going to be like Tonkachi's, where he's going to have it throughout most of the series. It's going to be really important, and probably just get, like, upgrades as it goes. That's one of the things I really am hoping for Tonkachi. Like, his hammer is super simple at the start. Kind of like, again, look at Tonkachi's hammer and just this one. Like, the way that the metal is drawn, it's similar in nature. So I'm guessing Tonkachi's hammer isn't, like, the blunt end, the heavy end, isn't made of steel. It's probably some fictional mineral, like, within, the Build King world. But looking at this, like, there's parts like inside they're able just to take the shovel and run it into a pillar, and it's like, okay, well, this special tool is able to do stuff to it, but they couldn't damage the outside. And there's even parts where they're trying to figure out exactly, like, they leave and they're just like taking a breather, looking at it from the outside and just trying to get an idea of what to do. I did really like the panel. I almost used it, but it was too small, and obviously it was not as important, of like when Tonkachi is talking to Renga about the skeleton, and you see essentially what the skeleton looks like underground, of like how it's buried, and this portion is only part of its mouth coming out of the ground. I thought that was actually really cool, and you see like what it looks like buried. I thought visually that just was really neat. The series has had a lot of really good just visuals like that, like X-ray visuals. It's one of those things I've thought about a lot. It'd be like if you looked at New York, but you looked at it kind of like how you look at an ant farm, to where you can see all the tunnels. Like, imagine, like, if you could pull it out of the ground and, like, see all of the, like, different subway tunnels and, like, underground areas you probably don't know about, that's like connecting to some boiler room to some random spot in a subway area that has like all this machinery areas downstairs. That's one of those things actually to really think about, because it is something that I've thought about. It's just a side note. Like, if you just look at like underground, like unknown underground areas in like New York and stuff, there's a lot of underground places, like shanty towns where homeless people live. There's a lot of underground stuff you don't think about. It's kind of spooky, but I enjoy the idea though, if you really think about viewing tunnels like that. It's like if you were kind of like if you probably a way better example. Anyone who's played Minecraft, if you go to like an area that isn't rendered, sometimes you can see underneath the ground and you see like cave systems and stuff, before the area renders and you can't see underground anymore, but you can still get a good view of, this X-ray style gaze into an area. I've always liked that. I've always thought that was cool. So just as a side note, because it has been a couple times already in the series, and I've enjoyed each of them, like the house beast, a couple chapters ago, just seeing what the castle looks like, and then the X-ray of this monster skull that I enjoyed. I love shots like that just because it gives a neat, just gives a general neat visual. But while they're talking, they figure out Tonkachi, instead of destroying it, he's going to improve it. So he's going to use the back end of his hammer. And I've mentioned, I do like that his hammer has two functions. It's got destruction and it's got like a renovation ability. So the plan, instead of destroying the house, is they're going to try and fix it. They're going to destroy and buff up the castle. And Tonkachi, because it's part of the living creature, so I imagine it's similar to how creatures still sense aspects of of this monster and the skeleton. Parts of it still seem to be alive, and they even say, I think they say that the castle, there's a new Fang trying to come out of it. The Fang is running away. It's being replaced by a new Fang. So I'm wondering what the plan is of what what it's gonna look like after, because obviously I know what the general plan is. Like Tonkachi also, he did the 10 meters so many times. Like I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like he did it multiple times. This is like it's funny because like chapter 1, I was like, oh, maybe he can only do it once before he gets kind of like exhausted. But it's like it's gone from like Sea Temple Yami Dimension Slash versus like now, where it's like back then it was like, oh, it takes probably a lot to do one, and it's like now it's like nothing to him. He's just throwing them out there. He's got better versions now and better spells. But I very genuinely really liked the chapter of Tonkachi when he was going all out against this thing, because you see a lot of understanding to his character's motivation. And even when he's like, I'm going to go out, you see just his general determination. He's hurt, like he's spitting up blood. He's clearly damaging himself, putting this much effort. He's exceeding the limits of what his body should be able to partake in. Like, he's probably using, like, adrenaline and whatnot. Like, it's really got to do a lot of damage to him. So I'm guessing he'll rest after this one. This has got to be the climax of the Upside Down Castle part, I would assume. I don't think they're going to... Probably the next chapter show like how it's fixed and renovated, like a new version or whatnot, and then after that, I'm guessing we'll get into like stuff that like was on the Nana call with going to this next site and whatnot. But when he was like saying how as a builder he wants to give shape to his client's wishes and it's his job, I really like that. I thought that just showed like his general determination. And when he says that he's building the wishes of his clients kind of thing, I think that really just gives a really strong understanding of how Tonkachi views his position in the world. He doesn't look at it as like, oh, I'm just cruising along. Like he's giving you very base ideas of what drives him and what kind of continues him. So I thought this is a really good chapter. I'm not going to go as long chatting about it because there was fun stuff, but I think it's not as massive setup as the previous chapter. It's really, in the area of conclusion for this arc. Like, the bigger things just generally, I think, to talk about were, like, stuff about the shovel, new stuff like understanding about what's going on at the castle and whatnot, the minerals it's made, kind of like the hype around it. Cork meeting, King Bat, I thought was, a pretty funny moment. The flashback with shovel, like those stuff you can go through really quickly. But other than like when he's talking to Tonkachi about giving form to his client's wishes, obviously that has something to do directly with, like I was saying, his motivation. So I really am looking forward to these next couple chapters, man. I've liked this a lot. I thought this was, like, again, a really good, just character-driven chapter. And one of the things about Build King I kind of want to just end with, it's kind of like not the exact same thing, but it's kind of like Yu-Gi-Oh! If you looked at Yu-Gi-Oh! From a sheet of paper, you looked at a summary, especially way further down the line of Yu-Gi-Oh! Like 5Ds or something, where it's like this, or like Zexal, or any of these ones where it's like it stops being like originally you get the start. It was like cool, these guys played these card games, and then they had like holographic technology. It escalated quickly. Whereas like way later in the series, the card game aspect is it's worldwide. It's like ingrained into their culture. It's like jumping that far ahead. It's gonna feel weird, but it's the characters. I think you gotta get them. You gotta really kind of go for the characters and then get immersed in the style of the world, so you understand why it's like this and whatnot. And that's how I think it is for Build King. I think Tonkachi is a really fun character so far, and I think people if they just focus more on like his design, not his design. His design I like, but it's not like he's amazing. Like, the serious Tonkachi looks kind of cool, and he's like, you know, he's not drawn as like chibi. Like, he's not like Tiny Charmy. He's more like just a regular one. Like, you actually look like a person instead of a chibi. But I do gotta say, I gotta pull the picture out of here. Just looking at Tonkachi's color scheme, I did notice, like, when I was talking to somebody the other day, he does have the McDonald's color palette, and I did think that was kind of funny. But I like Tonkachi in general. I think his design is good, but he's definitely not got, like... He's not like, I'm trying to think of a new character. Like, Undead Unluck, I think Andy's got a really sick design. I think his design is really cool. Like, Tonkachi definitely isn't, like, great in, like, the way of design right now. I think it's good, but... the best part of his design, I'll definitely give it to him, is the fact he uses a hammer instead of a sword. Because most guys are like, oh, I'm just going to use katana or just a sword in general, regardless of the style. Usually katanas. But hammers. You don't see a lot of weapons like this. It's like one of the reasons I wish both Yuno and Gray would go back to archery instead of using swords. But yeah, I did really genuinely really enjoy this chapter. And I think moments like this early on is really good. Because it really just gives you a reason to get attached. And it's not just like, oh yeah, it's a cool world building series. It gives you a reason to kind of keep going. I'm sure that some people probably didn't resonate with him, but I'm sure that there's a good amount of people as well that like read this chapter and like Tonkachi as a character after seeing some moments like this. So I was very happy about this. So other than that, no comment below. Tell me your thoughts about this chapter and tell me your thoughts on what's coming up. I'm looking forward to meeting some characters. I actually, just one more thing. I laughed because I was talking to my buddy this morning because we saw like the chapters of like other series that were like congratulating One Piece on chapter 1000, and Build King really only has a couple characters so far. So Shima Bakuro, instead of it just being like using his characters from the series, he is using like his characters in general. There were Toriko characters in there. There was that one that I haven't read. It's like a goof series where it's like this guy's like a leader. He's like short and has like a big nose. He's really goofy looking. It's from what I understand, it's a gag series. It's not like an action series. But Build King just doesn't have a lot of characters, so I'm hoping when we get to this build site, we can get like 2, maybe 3 more named characters. And if we can get 2 named characters, we got the Kopu guy, but we don't know anything about him. I'd count him. If we got 2 characters plus him, I'd be pretty happy. But anyway, even if we got 1 character plus him, I'd be pretty happy. But anyway, other than that, no, comment below, thumbs up the video, prefer the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. But other than that, I appreciate everyone who's already subscribed, and thank y'all for listening. Bye.